All right, thanks. Hello, everyone. I'm David McGinty, the Global Director of the Platform to Accelerate the Circular Economy, PACE. It's a pleasure to have you here and a pleasure to be here with you today. Just a little background, PACE is a coalition of around 100 CEOs and ministers, and what unites us is a common recognition of a flaw in our economic system, which is currently designed to extract natural resources, use them, and throw them away. And use of resources has tripled since 1970 and could double again by 2060 if we continue business as usual. So this system, as we know, that's why we're here, is pushing the planet to the brink. It's exasperating inequities, and it's simply bad for business. There's another way, and that's what we're here to talk about today, is specifically related to food systems. So if we think of our food systems in this current system, food is tightly connected with our environment, society, and our economy. And in recent decades, we've seen great achievements due to increases in productivity. There are over 200 million fewer hungry people in the world today than in 1990, despite a 2 billion increase in the global population. But the system will not sustain a global population of tomorrow. And the shocks of COVID-19 laid bare the vulnerabilities in the global food system for a lot of people to see for the first time. And, a big question that I have is how can we have a system where crops lie rotting in fields due to disrupted markets, while lines stretch for miles at emergency handouts, and simultaneously be good for business people and the environment? So here today to discuss this new common vision for circular food systems and actions we can all take today, we have three speakers who I'll introduce shortly. This event is a follow-up to the February launch of PACE's Action Agenda, which is the result of engaging over 200 experts working on circularity to establish a common vision and set of priorities for action in circular foods, plastics, electronics, textiles, and capital equipment. So today we'll talk with three leaders whose organizations are acting today to accelerate this work. And during the discussions, please use the Q&A function, and we'll include some of your questions in the discussions as we move forward. So first we have Petra Hans with us, who's been working at Ikea Foundation since 2011 to help realize its vision to create a better everyday life for many people, She now heads Agricultural Livelihoods Portfolio, which aims to support people who are dependent on agriculture to afford a better life while protecting the planet, focusing on East Africa and India. We also have with us Flemming Bessenbacher, who's chairman of the Danish think tank on food loss and food waste, onethird.org, chairman of the Carlsberg Group, and many, many other organizations. If you know food waste and loss, you know Flemming incredibly well. And we have with us Steve Schmida, who's the co-founder and chief innovation officer of Resonance. And at Resonance, he works with staff, clients, and partners on development of new products and services to drive meaningful impact in emerging markets. So first, I want to give each of the panelists kind of a time to introduce their organizations and themselves. And just to kind of situate this introduction, like I was saying, we started this action agenda process to get agreement on what the vision and the priorities are in these different areas of circularity, different materials and industries. And for me, the most interesting was food, because I found that when applying circular economy to food systems, we had the most fragmented, the most fragmentation of approaches. There was a lot of existing work going on food waste and loss, bringing circularity in. The big question was, what additional value does that perspective or lens bring to the discussion on food systems, not how does it supplant existing strategies. So we brought together over 50 experts and practitioners, including those from Ikea Foundation, from Flemming's teams, from Resonance and others, and established that common vision. You can see those reports on our website. And as we put more of a focus, Steve, would be great to know why Resonance decided to invest time and resources in the development of this particular action agenda.
Well, David, thanks so much. And I'm really pleased to be here with Petra and Flemming on this topic. So Resonance is a global consulting and advisory firm, and we work at the nexus of corporate sustainability and global development. And the heart of what we do is cross-sector collaboration. We help facilitate, build, manage partnerships of NGOs, companies, governments, and communities to solve complex and wicked problems in emerging markets. And that can range from issues like climate change to global health, to human trafficking, and so forth. And we've been working in agriculture and food security for many years, and in a variety of different dimensions. And over the last, I would say, 5 to 7 years, we started to realize that the focus just on food security itself and livelihoods wasn't enough, right? As it became more apparent just how central agriculture is to climate emissions. I mean, we're talking 30%, right? The food system is responsible for 30% of climate emissions, right? We just realized the existing approaches were simply not going to be enough. Now, the unique lens that circularity, I think, brings to all of this is that in food systems, we can get major climate gains, right? While simultaneously improving the food security and livelihoods of farmers, particularly those most vulnerable in emerging markets, in Latin America, in Asia, in sub-Saharan Africa. Now, along with that, though, is an issue of collective action, right? Circularity, the food system, as David mentioned, as you mentioned, is so complicated and so fragmented that no one actor can really drive circularity on their own. We need governments, NGOs, and communities and industry to work together. And when you reached out to me about PACE, this is what really got me excited, because you're bringing together, PACE brings together the leaders from across these sectors and is really designed to move from rhetoric and commitment to action and results. And that's really why we're excited to be part of the platform. And I think we're so excited today to see to talk about the circular economy call to action for food systems. So that's just a bit of an overview of how we came to be here today, and super excited with the rest of the conversation.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great. This report wouldn't have happened without your team. So, and I call it a report sometimes, and I forget it's not a report. We didn't just write something. This real kind of a collective agenda. Petra, from how does circular economy for food fit into IKEA Foundation's mission and work, and maybe what are some examples about how this resonates with your work?
Yeah, thank you. So the IKEA Foundation, we support families in East Africa and India to afford a better life and to protect the planet. And we do so by investing in green economic solutions and by transforming the agricultural livelihoods on which the majority of the people that we target depend. So we want to transform them into ones that are, first of all, inclusive. So they're valuing and benefiting smallholder farmers. 2, they are regenerative, meaning that they become a sustainable way of productive and healthy food production, as well as circular. So they become resource efficient and keeping resources and nutrients in the loop, and reducing greenhouse gas emissions in the process. And we support initiatives and partners that work on different levels and push different levers. And because we think that only by working together again and working on different levels, we can have the strongest impact. So for instance, we invest in what we call prototyping of in the field, people and planet positive models to generate evidence and learn and share the learnings with others. We also support research programs that help us understand how people make choices and to think through what are potential pathways towards that inclusive, regenerative, and circular food system. And finally, we also invest in programs that help drive finance and investment sectors to include the risks of so-called conventional agriculture and land use into their investments, and understand that if we continue to support models that degrade the land that people are dependent on, will no longer be sustainable. And so looking also like the calls to action in the PACE report, I think, lots of the work that our partners do, they touch upon many of these calls to action. And I would say there is two that really stand out. And what we do is really try to scale productive and regenerative agriculture, and reframe wasted food and byproducts. And in our case, it's more loss, and see them as valuable resources.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, you really have such a breadth of a portfolio that really covers a lot of the actions here, and they're great examples if people go and explore some of what your partners are doing. Fleming, why is, you're coming from Denmark and a lot of different engagements, both there and globally. Why is the circular economy for food important in Denmark, and what specifically is how is 1/3 aligned with these priorities?
Well, I think food loss and food waste is a huge problem around the world, and of course also in Denmark. And I was asked by the Danish government to be heading a think tank on food loss and food waste. And I've previously been asked by the Danish government actually also to head a committee on circular economy, where sort of the 4 R's was reduce, reuse, recycle, and rethink. And we came there with a lot of recommendations to the Danish government. The Danish government have now a policy on circular economy. And part of the recommendation from the circular economy was also on food loss and food waste. And as you know, SDG 12.3 is that we should all try to halve the food loss and food waste before 2030. And we're doing that also in Denmark here. As you know, the Danish government have very ambitious goal of cutting the CO2 emission by 70% before 2030. And I don't think it's really recognized how much food loss and food waste is also accounting for the greenhouse emission. Also from a financial point of view, I think first of all, the reason for 1/3 is, as you all probably know, that around 1/3 of all food is getting wasted from farm to fork, and that's an astonishing number. I was very surprised when I heard that number for the first time. It costs around $140 billion every year, just food loss and food waste, and it's around 8% of the world's global emission. So this is numbers which we cannot forget about, and we should also be aware about. We also should aware about that there are sort of impacts of food loss. Land is wasted when we use agriculture to produce food, which is then lost or wasted. Water is used for the agriculture we grow, which is wasted food. And finally, I think also that it's from an ethical humanitarian point of view, we have a lot of food loss and food waste, and still 8 million people is going to bed every day being hungry. So I think both from a ethical humanitarian, also from a business point of view, and certainly also from a sustainability point of view, this is things we have to act upon. We have every year from the think tank to come with 10 recommendations to the Danish government. 8 of those is sort of focused on the Danish system here, where we're trying to really establish partnerships across the whole value chain to act collectively doing this year. And again, joining PACE, it's a real great honor for doing that. But so we have really been talking too much about this year, and now time have come to action here. So coming from a lot of ideas, we now have to show results and actually action and get that implemented into society. We would like to do that, the Danish system. But I think Denmark also, as a very small country, has a commitment to do what is best in Denmark and sharing our best knowledge to the rest of the world. So 3 of our recommendations is also addressing when Danish ministers are traveling around in the world, bringing some of the best knowledge from Denmark out to the rest of the world. I think also from the food business point of view, if you want to future-proof your business, I mean, I think at some point of time, consumers will act and say, this is not acceptable. So I think also from a business point of view, we are trying to develop business models here showing what is the business impact when you're talking about food loss and food waste. And there's some numbers saying that 14-to-1 payback for reducing food loss and food waste for the investment required. So I think actually also I'm trying at least to advocate for businesses. It's actually a pretty good business case to invest in this year. Finally, I mean, if I just may allow it here, David, to say a little bit about my other job as being chairman of Carlsberg. As you know, Carlsberg is producing a lot of great beers around the world here. And also there, we are trying to really reduce food loss and food waste. As you know, if you're great beers, people normally drink the beers, so very little is wasted there. But one of the issues in many food industries is, of course, packaging. And you know, when we're selling our beers around the world, it's actually so that we have cans, we have PET bottles, and we have glass bottles here. And it's around 40% of Carlsberg's value chain carbon footprint, which is actually coming from packaging. And therefore also actually In Denmark, for example, we have a fantastic Danish return system where we are returning 90% of all PET and cans in the Danish system here. And we're trying to implement that in other areas around the world. We're also trying now to actually recycle plastic in our PET bottles, which go from right now 25% to 50% by 2025. And also we are trying to have an integral part of creating efficient return system, both in the Nordic and the Baltics, and also in Asia, trying to advocate for refillable bottles across the world. So this again, circularity of reduce, reuse, recycle, and resync is very important. I think also from an innovation point of view, as you know, David, I have a background in professor nanoscience, and I think really the science community have a lot to offer in these areas here again. So I'm very pleased to be here today, very honored to be here, and also very honored to be part of the PACE program here. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks. I think that's a common characteristic of the two of us. I'm coming from this innovation and technology background, working in developing countries and emerging markets. And that combination of equity and development with innovation and technology is really what gets me up in the morning. So I'm glad to have a fellow in that. You know, Fleming, you were touching on a lot of different points, but one of the common elements was on one side, something viewed as waste, and the other side viewed as value, or viewed as a cost and viewed as an opportunity. And a lot of these calls to action, even Petra was referring to, look at, you know, increasing the value of nature regenerative food, looking at reframing waste as a valuable resource. You know, even enabling sanitary cycles of human waste is about revaluing waste. So it's interesting that you're coming at this in a lot of ways from the private sector. What are some ways every year you're coming up with these 10 recommendations for the public sector, but actually how do you translate a list of 10 things into actually action that the public sector is going to take up? How do you from the private sector side start to move this specific agenda with them?
I think in these areas and many other areas within sustainability, public partnership is very, very important. And I mean, in Denmark, you could sort of went to our ministers and had legislation and say you should do so and so and so. But that's not a really typical Danish way of doing it here. I think there's a Danish system, a lot of trust to businesses, to authorities, also to civil society and NGOs and so forth here. So we are really trying in the one third here to have all people from the primary sector to the industry sector to the restaurants and so forth, and also the business being involved here. We run what is called a voluntary agreement, Denmark Against Food Waste. We're really trying to get people on this platform here. We're trying, first of all, to measure food loss and food waste, because when you start measuring it, then suddenly it's getting astonished to see how much food is actually lost. And then you can actually measure every year, how can we actually reduce this food loss and food waste here? And also sharing by best practices. I think it's very important that, I mean, just sharing with these companies here from the different sectors, see how can we actually, when we go from one sector to the other, try to help you reduce the food loss and food waste. And finally, I think also innovation here. There's different sort of innovation, biotechnology. I think also a lot of the new digital platforms can help us sort of reducing food loss and food waste. In Denmark, we have a sort of digital platform, Too Good To Go, where actually you go onto the digital platform, you take food which has otherwise been lost, and then sell at this platform with a reduced price. So I think you just have to sort of, as I said before, reduce, reuse, recycle, but think outside the box and trying to help the different organizations coming into a different platform here. And I think this voluntary agreement has been worked excellently. We have also worked very closely with RAP in the UK, and I'm very amazed how the results they have gained there. And finally, I would like to add in the private households, you know, I mean, you can talk about the private sector, you can talk about the retail sector, the food industry, but also at homes. Again, around 1/3 of the food loss is wasted at home. So just educating both parents and children and young people to actually, you should never throw any food away. Try to manage your fridge, trying to, when you do shopping, trying to make a plan for what are you going to shop for the next week and so forth here. Just a little bit of planning can help immensely.
Yeah, I think that's a kind of the three-prong approach that you're taking there. We have a good question here. I think I want to just give this to you from the audience immediately, Fleming, which is, you know, from that business perspective, we have this issue of inequitable consumption as well, where we have massive overconsumption in some spots and others. And I appreciate that's very different in countries and regions and beverages versus foods and different types of foods. But that's a good example of, you're a senior leader. How do you start to influence and open up conversations with business leaders about consumption patterns that may be hurting the environment or different communities?
Well, to me, I was last evening reading the reports from the UN climate panel, and right now we're heading to an increase in the temperature of 3.7 degrees. 3.7 degrees. Just think about 3.7 degrees of the global temperature of the globe. It will be completely different. And we may come to this tipping point where there's no point of return. And therefore, I think also when I went to World Economic Forum in Davos and so forth here, I think sometimes government has been lagging behind and has been difficult to take this really difficult decision in governments and so forth here. I actually now see business leaders stepping up, because if we do not have a sustainable world, we do not have any businesses. And therefore, I'm really very, very pleased to see how many business leaders are stepping up, having sustainability fully integrated in their strategy. In old days, the CSR report was sitting on the side and not really integrated strategy. You can simply not run a business today without having sustainability fully integrated in your business. And I think this message, if that is carried by the businesses, see what happened in the world today. We were able in 1 year to develop a vaccine for the pandemic here, COVID-19, again through a public-private partnership. Huge investment around the world. If the same money would be used to actually solve some of the problems we're discussing here today, we can easily solve it. But the reason that was done before was that, we saw people dying around the world and we had to save the world and so forth here. I would like the same willingness to invest in just climate change and food loss and food waste from government side, then we can easily solve the problem. It may take a year, but I think in 2030, we would have a much better world. But it requires investment, both from the industry, but also from governments.
Yeah, I think that's a good attitudinal shift as well. Approaching business not as the problem, but the business leaders really are. There are leaders out there who are stepping out in front and can lead. Petra, if I can turn to you, there's Denmark's perspective is one, but really you bring a perspective and you're really trying to support farmers and farmer livelihoods. I'm the grandchild of farmers, as I'm sure if you took a poll in the audience and you just go back 2 generations, we all are. When we think of food, how do we begin to honor and respect farmers and food production, and especially in this kind of urban global world that we're living in? Can you talk about the importance of giving farmers and small businesses a voice in this agenda?
Yeah, thank you. And it was really interesting also to hear Flemming talk about, what are the issues in the high emitting countries and where food loss and waste is really a problem often on the consumption and retail side. So before I go into your question, I also want to say that I want to pick up on that. The importance of halving food loss and waste needs a different approach in different parts of the countries or in the world. So in the geographies where we work, most of the food loss happens in the upstream part of the value chain. So in harvest, post-harvest, processing, and distribution. And in the African continent, for example, small to medium enterprises or agribusinesses play a key role in these upstream supply chain stages because they deliver about 2/3 of all the food consumed in Africa. So how we address it there is to work with partners in these areas to support and set up these agribusinesses to design out waste and loss and to make profitable new products from food loss and byproducts. And with this, we aim to stimulate a circular agri-food system that provides multiple benefits for not only for the environment, but also for economy and livelihoods. And so we work with organizations like NVU or Bopink, where we support these businesses to really design out food loss from the system. And this circular economy approach goes hand in hand with our focus on regenerative agriculture, because we see a worrying trend towards a quick boost of productivity through the use of external inputs, often expensive inputs, like chemical fertilizer, because that boosts production. But if we're not careful, this can I say, short-term approach can lead to extractive land use and degrading of valuable ecosystems. So we want to move away from this maximization of yield per hectare and really go to an optimization of the system. So we look at promoting more local and diverse agri-food systems. And I just saw a question also in the chat asking about reviving heritage food in East Africa. And I think that's really, an important part of what we're trying to do. More local, more shorter, more diverse value chains, really building on what is already out there and what was part of the system. So we look at promoting local and diverse agri-food systems and value chains where farmers benefit and also are part of the discussions around policies as well. So we can't talk about transforming the food systems if we don't include the people that actually produce the food. And if we want to go for a transformation, we need to make sure that we include the smallholder farmers who are a part large of the food production. So how can we support these farmers to be part of these policy discussions? Well, that is something that we do, again, through our partners. So we support partners like the Agroecology Fund, who's supporting farmers and movements on the ground, in our case, in India and East Africa, to really be able to raise their voice, be able to show models and generate evidence of how alternative systems to this short-term thinking of growing production can make are a viable alternative. We also support Yalta. It's an initiative that supports young people who want to move to agroecological solutions. And for instance, our partner Pradhan in India works a lot with women groups, most of whom are farmers who have an agribusiness, to help them to join forces and become a strong voice in local development decisions. To mention some other work that we do through WRI's Land Accelerator, we also aim to build like sort of clout of farmers and agri-entrepreneurs to grow their farmer business on regenerative principles. And by helping to elevate their voices, we hope that they can really take a part in these policy decisions. So it's really working through our partners, then trying to reach the farmers, the food producers, the agri-businesses, to be able to build up a strong voice and then see how we can actually help to leverage these voices.
If you were advising other people setting up kind of a portfolio of projects or designing new work based on this, kind of what advice would you give us?
Well, you can never do it right if you don't include the groups that are actually, if you talk about climate change, smallholder farmers are actually at the receiving end of climate change, and they need to make sure that they adapt to climate change, but also treating them as part of the solution. So how can we really invest in initiatives that really reach these groups? That is super important. But again, we can't do it without pulling levers on all kinds of levels and systems. So it really depends on what kind of funder you are. And I think we as funders have to make sure that we work on I wouldn't say for a foundation to work on a pre-competitive basis, but really let go of our egos and logos and make sure that we work together in approaches to pull the levers at all levels.
Yeah, the farmers probably don't care about your logo that much. Probably care about their livelihoods and those sorts of things. Steve, I know you've been working a lot in the agriculture and food space with PepsiCo and USAID and lots of others. Based on what you're hearing from Petra and Fleming, how does this resonate with you? Or are there any complementary learnings that you have before we get to your points? Are there any complementary learnings that you have reflecting on this?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. First off, to Petra's point about being inclusive, right, and transparent. I think oftentimes, because these problems are so global in nature, right? And you have to work across sectors, and that's really, really hard. It becomes, you know, folks get so focused working across that they forget to be inclusive and bring in the voices of smallholder farmers, of communities, of all the folks impacted. Now, you have to design that inclusivity in a way that still enables you to get stuff done, right? Because we need to be practical, and we need to move to action. And that, to me, when you're designing these cross-sector partnerships and dealing with the governance question, is often one of the biggest challenges, right? Is how do you bring in that smallholder farmer voice in a way that's meaningful and powerful, but at the same time recognize that you have processes, things need to move quick, you know, move from decision to action and so forth. And I think that's something that when Petra was sort of laying out her vision and her approach, that I thought really made sense. And then going back to Fleming's comments, you know, and the role and the incentives around business, I think there is also a couple of other dimensions here. I mean, I think we need to think about the growing role that investors are playing in driving these agendas, right? And how, you know, there's the policy environment, but then there's the role that investors play, right? And we have massive pools of capital, right? We've gone from a world 100 years ago of capital scarcity to a world where we have, one could even argue, almost overabundance of capital, right? And the difficulty is deploying it efficiently. And so I think investors have a key role here. And then the other piece I would say that often gets a little left out in these discussions are our employees, right? And the role that employees play in businesses. You know, these days, the war for talent, right, to get the very best folks is incredibly central to many companies' competitive edge. And that gives that talent an opportunity to have a voice, right? And to be able to say, hey, we want to work for a company that reflects our values and that's thinking about the future. And so I think just based on what Fleming was saying, sort of thinking about other ways of creating sort of incentives and drivers for business. And then just a couple of other things around when you're thinking about sort of cross-sector partnerships and collaboration, particularly in such a complicated area like food systems. And this may sound fairly obvious, but one of the key areas, you know, to start with is getting really crystal clear on the problem you want to solve, right? And you know, if you look at the call to action, there are sort of 10 broad calls to action. You need to look at those, see which ones you're interested in, but then drill down and get pretty granular. And the reason I say that is oftentimes partnerships start at a very high level, but then when we get down to more brass tacks, they fall apart because folks weren't really clear on what was the problem they were trying to solve. I think it's another key piece here when building these types of partnerships is to very carefully sort of map out resources and capabilities. Different sectors, different organizations bring remarkable capabilities. You may have a co-op of farmers, right, that have incredible reach back into their communities and they can mobilize savings and that sort of thing. You may have a technology partner that can bring funding, but maybe more importantly could bring cloud solutions to some of these issues. So thinking about resources and mapping resources and getting alignment there is really key. And then just one other thing I would say is recognize that we may share goals when we do these cross-sector partnerships, but our motivations may differ, and that's okay, right? We need to be able to respect the fact that we may share a shared goal of reducing food waste, but a company might see it as a business opportunity and a way of increasing market share. A nonprofit might see it as an opportunity to build out a new technical area for them to work in. And a government may see it as an opportunity to advance their sort of policy and political agenda. Those motivations are legitimate within the context of the sectors in which they operate. And I think oftentimes we see partnerships get in a little bit of trouble when partners may share the same goals, but they don't necessarily respect each other's motivations quite as much as they should. And by respect, that doesn't mean agree, right? There's a difference between respecting and agreeing. Respecting means, I may not agree with it, but I understand why you have that point of view. and I can live with it. And I think that's also incredibly important in partnership is, yes, share goals, but respecting differing and varying motivations.
Yeah, Petra, on this idea of just taking an idea into an on-the-ground action, what experiences have you had, or what roles do you see for IKEA Foundation playing as a broker, even sometimes, even if you're not implementing? How do you kind of take those big ideas and farmers' input and then translate that into a partnership that works?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I as a foundation or as a portfolio looking at these issues, we don't claim to have the answers. We were a very principle-based portfolio or foundation where we look at how can we move towards a vision where we want to be. And so we talk with quite a lot of different kind of organizations that come from different angles. So also to Steve's point, we have to work together with the many partners that we think are principle and value aligned, but all move towards a similar goal. And how they do it, really depends on how they work out that program, on their strength, where they're coming from. So we think that only by respecting how they approach a project and a problem, we can move towards something that is bigger than all of us. So I just wanted to say that we don't have the answers. We work with partners that are much more knowledgeable about what is happening on the ground. They know much more how farmers in the geographies where we work live, how they make decisions, etc. And so by working with these partners on different areas and different levels, we think that we can build a cloud again of organizations moving towards something that, a food system transformation as how we see it. And we have a number of examples where we can show that the people in the projects are actually really moving the needle on work that we're trying to do. We have partners that have a long track record in working on livelihoods in general, but we also have, we support new initiatives that are really looking at how can we really move the sector from a different approach again. So to come to sort of, we've just approved a program with I think it's the Partnership on Biodiversity Accounting, PBAF, where we are looking at how can we really get the banks and the finance sector to take into account biodiversity in their investments. On the other hand, we work directly with farmers. We work with practical action on how can we support agroecology in their work. So it's really trying to get everything together, get them to talk to each other and make sure that we support them wherever some extra push is needed. And with support, I mean, we support them financially, but if we need to lend our brand name, for instance, to a coalition or something that's happening, we are happy to do so.
Exactly. Yeah, one of the questions we're getting in the comments is around behavior change, which can really touch on a lot of different things. Basically, any change is behavior change. You might need a behavior to adopt a policy or a behavior in your consumption, whatever it is. But maybe Fleming, let me ask you about that and how behavior change is featuring in the work that you're doing. In the calls to action, for example, of course, we're talking about enabling transition to healthy diets. That's a behavior change, but there's sometimes I'll call this scope 3 food loss. You've got, how do you get the company that produces or the supermarket that sells to then help inform the customer to look at expiry dates, to look at labels, to not, you know, a lot of the loss is happening at home. It can't just be what's in that small part of the value chain for the retailer or the producer. So how are you thinking about behavior change with your companies, and how do you see the power of marketing, you know, being a tool for behavior change?
I think this behavioral change is incredibly important, David. And, you know, I mean, it's everything from the business, from the CEO, also from the consumers and so forth. And I still believe that there's three words again, which is very important here, and that's target, measure, and act. Because if you are really setting out targets, it can be targets in sort of our homes, it can be targets in the retail sector, it can be targets in the private sector, it can be targets from the industry sector and so forth here. If you set out targets, then the next thing is to try to measure it. And again, I mean, you can measure food loss and waste in all different value chains. You can actually also measure at home. You can take your weight every day, and when you throw something out, try just to weigh what you're throwing out and try to see, I mean, how many kilos of food have I thrown out by the end of the week. And then finally, I mean, if you're doing these things, I think then you have to act. And therefore, I think as a scientist also, this ability to actually measure things, that means that you have numbers, which you then can compare from 1 month to the next, from 1 year to the next, and so forth, and see the trends is going in the right direction. I think also from the consumer point of view, I think we have been through an era here, and I know it's huge difference from being in a small village in Africa and from being in Copenhagen, where I am right now, and so forth here. But it's actually also lack of valuing food. I think food has been seen as a very cheap commodity. And therefore, some people, you know, are not really valuing that, okay, I buy a hamburger and I only eat half of it and then I throw the rest away here. But some people actually forgetting about what is actually the impact on our society when you're doing these things here. The amount of water, the amount of energy, the amount of land being used here. And finally, I think I've talked to a lot of chefs in the restaurants. And if you go to some of the Michelin restaurants and talk to chefs there, they never throw anything away. If there's something wasted from one day, they can cook a soup, they can do a salad, or they can do many things here. So actually also these skills in educating the next generation of consumers, actually being better in cooking, better understanding how to store food, how to put labels in our fridge and so forth. So there's many things which actually we can learn how to do. And I think also therefore educating the next generation of people. I mean, educating in schools about food loss and food waste. Because you may argue that my generation, I mean, well, it doesn't help that you try to educate us, although I'm trying to do it with my friends and so forth here. But actually also educating the next generation of people, because they will really be suffering from this 3.7 degree of global warming here. And we saw it in Denmark, we've seen many around places where people like Greta Thunberg and others walk around the street and talk about sustainability. I think the action from young people exactly something with actually sometimes it's also waking up the political system. I was at the UN General Assembly, where again young people were sort of sitting with Guterres and discussing these things, sustainability and so forth here. It's their generation. We have a responsibility for every generation to give the world back at least in the same condition we received from our parents. I'm pretty sure my generation will be the first generation not doing that. And we have there an ethical issue which we have to deal with. And that's why I'm getting engaged in this very important topic here.
Yeah, Steve, maybe you're sitting sometimes with residents in this confluence of over-consuming economies and under-consuming or production economies, however you want to categorize groups. I mean, from your perspective, when you look at behavior change, are the clients you're working with looking at meeting existing consumer needs and desires, or are they looking to progress consumer desires? Like, where does the work sit now, and how can you help influence where it goes?
Well, Dave, I think what we're seeing is a couple of things. I think first we're seeing a real profound shift with a lot of food and bev companies about going back at the other end of the value chain, right? So we've been talking for a few minutes about consumers. Let's go back to the farmers, right? And I think when we go back to the farmers, you start to see companies recognizing that their source of their livelihoods for these companies is based on farms that are going to be severely impacted by climate change and any other number of pressures. And so, you know, one area where we see companies moving quite quickly And I think moving from sort of talking to doing is around sort of climate smart agriculture on the farm, right? And just one example of this in an interesting dimension, right, is there's a partnership between PepsiCo and USAID to empower women smallholder farmers in PepsiCo's supply chain in places like India, I think Colombia, and a few other countries. And the purpose of that partnership is to do two things. One is the immediate empowerment of women in the agricultural decision-making process, right? Because that's a proven methodology, right? To improve agricultural yields and incomes and so forth. But the second piece of it is getting the data that and the insights that PepsiCo and other industry players need to understand the intersection between climate smart agriculture and empowering marginalized groups in their supply chain, folks that have been historically ignored. And so I think that is a huge mindset shift. If you were to say like 15 years ago that companies would be worried about this sort of thing, I think you would have had a lot of folks scratching their head, right? But here we are, very mainstream companies starting to take this on. And so I think thinking about like where I see a lot of action at the company level right now is first and foremost at that, at the sourcing level. I think going back to the consumption piece, I think this is something where, again, consumer behavior, employee behavior, investor sort of lenses on this sort of thing are really important. And I think we are starting to see shifts, but it is, it's a bigger shift, mindset shift in my view, right? Than some of the upstream. I don't know how Petra and others feel about it, but that's sort of what we're observing at this point.
Yeah, Petra, how are you feeling about
it? About the mind that we're seeing that mind shift, whether we see that as well.
Yeah.
Yes, I think we have the benefit of being associated with a brand who takes circular economy very serious and is really also transforming their business. They actually see sustainability as their business. So in that sense, I think that we also have a great example of the company behind us. Yeah, and I think the trend has been too much towards instant gratification, a commodification of things. So it becomes too easy for us to access things in the here and now and immediately. And we really have to really start thinking philosophizing, if you call it a word, how do we value again what nature and what the land gives us? So really think beyond or within the planetary boundaries. How can we stimulate growth in our planetary boundaries? And if I look at how we work in the geographies where we work, I think it's a slightly different angle that we're taking. What we hear a lot is, a lot of these farmers in East Africa, for example, already have very little resources. And now you come in and you tell them to do regenerative agriculture. Well, they're already using they're already very circular in how they use the inputs in the resources. And so I think, it's not, again, it's not us telling them how to do things, but to help them and partners to think through, like, how can we make alternative approaches to productivity and food systems mainstream and not follow the trend of, again, instant gratification or the push for productivity, the push for profit, but really seeing that as part of a larger system and make sure that we really support models that are optimizing this system. So what are models that are good for people, so they bring income, productivity, but also nutritious food. And at the same time, how can we make sure that we link them to markets that provides a good production for them? Yeah, it's a different part of the chain or the system. And I think, we really need to work all together. Even the export value chains, we see that companies are really looking at how can we within the value chain, within the sourcing of our products, become much more regenerative. And I think, we have to grab these developments where we work with private sector, with businesses that see the importance of becoming regenerative and circular in their work, and also work together with the farmers from the bottom up to already show like how can we do that differently. So, yeah, again, it comes back to making sure we connect on the levers and the different levels and make sure that we bring them together.
Yeah, it's definitely clear that on this agenda, there's not a standard global approach, that it's really local. Food is very localized and you can't apply the approaches of plastics to food systems. And it's got very different priorities in Denmark, but the same ultimate objectives versus say in Kenya or Tanzania. And one of the common things we hear is about healthy diets. That's the kind of perspective that we look at. That's where most of the emissions are coming from, is our unhealthy diets, wanting out of season foods that are not local. So how do we have slow food, cold food, cool food, local supply chains, heritage crops, like was brought up earlier, nature-based type solutions in food systems. So, one of the questions in the audience, we're kind of coming closer to the end. I want to make sure this is getting as many questions as possible. But as we look to kind of some concluding reflections, one of the questions was about when is pressure or advocacy needed? To me, the positive flip side of that is where's the biggest opportunity for us to do something bigger? So as you think back on the discussion we've just had, Fleming, maybe I'll start with you. What's your kind of takeaway thought of, where's the big thing that we really need to move on together that maybe there's just not enough attention on from your viewpoint?
Well, I could mention many things, but if I just should mention maybe just one, and that's starting with the top. When we could convince the head of business leaders and the head of states acted to do something about these things here, I think we will have reached a huge goal. I think actually, again, like in Denmark here, where we have this 70% reduction plan for the CO2 emission, realizing then that this is not just a question about shifting into more wind farms and solar cells and power tracks and whatnot. Food loss and food waste is an important parameter on that sustainability issue here, and the green gas emission, which is at around 10% of the world's green gas emission. So I think when every government have to integrate also food loss and food waste in their sustainability strategy. And at the same time, if all business leaders around the world, of course, not least in the food sector, but also in the packaging area and retail area and everywhere, actually will start to realize this is something we have to act upon. I respect highly a number of NGOs. I respect highly what the Ikea Foundation, the small farmers in Africa and so forth here. But, if the needles really should change at a faster speed than we're doing today, then head of states and business leaders, when they start to see this as a problem, and also at least business leaders start to see this as a business opportunity, I think we will see a huge change going forward here. So that would be my hope. But there's many other things. I talked a lot about consumers. You and I can do things at our homes, David, and we should all do this, and we should all try to speak about this here. Also, when we go out to the dinner table, talk to young people about, we can all do a little bit to help solving this problem.
Yeah, and Petra, what are some kind of, thinking about what Fleming's saying and also the previous discussion, what are some of your reflections where we need to focus?
I'll keep on repeating myself in a way, because I think one of the values that we share also with the Ikea, the business, is the value of togetherness. And we have a massive challenge ahead of us, and food and land use issues or agri-food systems are a very big part of that. And so in, let's say again, in the higher emitting or the higher consumption countries, we really need to look at how do we consume, and that we really have to reduce consumption, and especially in food loss and waste. And on the other side, where, you know, in the geographies where we work, we have to understand that the way we grow our food, in the trend that we still see evolving, is really degrading land and landscapes, which is jeopardizing future food production. It's jeopardizing the ecosystems on which we actually build our whole food system. And if we lose the land that produces our food, we also lose the communities on that land. So I think that what businesses really need to realize, that a lot of these businesses are actually dependent on what the land gives us. If we can get that thinking through all across the world, we can move towards a system which is regenerative, which is circular, and becomes indeed a business opportunity. I think, again, so coming back, the key word here is, again, togetherness. And I think what I want to mention here as well is PACE as a platform is also joining forces with all kinds of organizations working somehow on, well, accelerating the circular economy. So we think that's a great initiative, and we'd love to see more on how this, what this will bring.
Yeah,
and I just wanted to, I got reminded of some of the words of the CEO of Ikea, the business. You know, he says that we have to be massively optimistic and make sure that we all put our weight behind this change. We need to take a leap of faith because we don't have all the answers yet, but we have to work together. So that is what I'll repeat here.
Excellent. Steve, any kind of 30 seconds, any concluding?
I mean, I think Petra and Fleming nailed it on the head. I mean, the importance of collaboration is essential here. I'm speaking to everybody here from Vermont in the East Coast of the United States. And I think Vermont has made some real gains around connecting, you know, farm to fork and that sort of thing through collaboration, right? And through valuing rural landscapes. I think as we become an increasingly urbanized society, we also need to recognize the value of rural. And so, you know, if there are two things I could leave folks with today, it's one, the importance of partnerships, and two, you know, sort of valuing the land and our rural landscapes. I think that would, you know, those would be two great takeaways.
Yeah, excellent. I mean, this has been wonderful. Thank you for sharing these thoughts and for all the great questions. I mean, we really got to a lot of the questions, which is sometimes quite uncommon. I mean, some of my big takeaways here are what Jasper's words that Petra, you just shared, of being massively optimistic. He's also on the board of directors for the World Resources Institute, which says, count it, change it, scale it, which is the approach to practically take the action, count it, change it, scale it, which Fleming was kind of right on with your target, measure, act. So I hear a lot of resonance there between the different talking points. So thanks for coming together. Thanks for your contributions, and thanks for letting us at PACE help you as much as possible. Follow us and look out for more projects launching out on the action agenda. I think Seth put in pacecircular.org for the website that has the action agenda. It has a lot of this learning captured in it already. So with that, thanks a lot, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day.